Lord, renew our faith in your power to renew our lives and make our water into wine to the glory of your name. Amen. If this was a family service, I would turn water into wine for you. This is the only church in which I haven't done it, but I need to set things up. And I'm not sure it would work at that sort of distance up in the gallery, but I do it quite happily and quite frequently. And it always causes a certain amount of amusement, because everybody knows it is a trick. It's one of the fruits of having been a chemist in my previous existence, that I know how to do this. And as I say, just people laugh light-heartedly and watch and are entertained. But on one occasion I really carried it off. I'd been invited to be one of the speakers on the use of visual aids in preaching at a clergy conference. And I'd shown them various things that I'd used at different services and talked about setting them up. Then I just sort of said, of course I can turn water into wine, but I haven't got the kit here, I haven't got any water. At which point, some bright spark said, there's a carafe of water behind you. And there, sure enough, was the speaker's carafe. So I took the glass off the top, poured out water, and it turned red. And the whole place completely dissolved into total consternation. After a little while, of course, they realised that I'd got in the lunch break and spiked it all. It was all much a set-up as my normal service thing. Because they weren't expecting it, it caused absolute ructions. It just gave me some inkling into what it must have been like to be one of the disciples when Jesus did the real thing. I mean, John lightheartedly says, they saw his glory and they put their faith in him. But it must have been utterly, absolutely gobsmacking. What I would love to have had in the gospel, it isn't there because Thomas doesn't seem to have joined the disciples yet. But if Thomas had been there, he would certainly have said, Lord, how do you do that? And I would love to know for real, instead of doing a little acid base indicator trick. There's no answer, of course, and John doesn't attempt to give us an answer. In fact, he passes off the miracle almost lightheartedly. He says, and the water was taken to the steward, the maitre d', and he tasted it, and of course it was wine. When did it happen? When they pulled the water out of the well? When they poured it into the jug? While it was lying there? While they carried it to him? Or did it just taste like it when he drank it? No help whatsoever. It's utterly inexplicable. And of course it has to be inexplicable. It's part of the otherness of Jesus. This happens, and happens not in some meagre way. It isn't that those jars contained the rest of the wine and Jesus gave them the rinsings. This is Premier Cru Palestine 29 that he serves up. Nothing but the best. And the disciples are astounded and they believe in him. Well, of course they do. If something like that happens, it is going to completely blow your mind. But just as John doesn't say what happened or even give an inkling, he doesn't really say what they believed. There's a lot of gospel to go yet. And there are a lot of signs that Jesus will do. In fact, the Gospel of John is built on the spine of these signs that Jesus works, usually followed by a discourse which explains what it's all about. But in this case, we get no explanation of what it means, any more than we get an explanation of what might have happened. If you take your pew sheets, then I give you some clues as to what it might mean and what might be implied by the reading. It's full and rich with illusions. But all the disciples can have believed, I think, at this stage in the proceedings was, this guy is something else. I'm going to stick around and see what else he can do and see what has happened. And so they stick around and they learn. And the testimony at the end, right at the beginning of the gospel, is the Word became flesh, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son. He so astounded them that they began to believe that this was more than just a really remarkable man. This was the revelation of God himself. This really was something else. And so the signs are recorded, and John tells us precisely why. In order that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him you may have life in his name. Life, as Jesus puts it in the gospel, this very gospel itself. They may have life and have it more abundantly. That life that is the freedom, that is the living water, or better still, is the wine. Turning the water into wine sets the tone for the life which Jesus gives. It is supposed to be astounding. It is not supposed to be dull. Church, I have to say, often is. And church committees even more so. But Jesus never is. He pushes the boundaries of the possible. And lo and behold, the boundaries give way. And I wonder what Mary expected when she came to Jesus and said, there's no wine. Interesting that she came to him. As far as we know, by this time Joseph is dead and Jesus has been the chief breadwinner of the family for some time, and she has known that this is a guy who can fix it. But what could he have said? Okay, I'll nip down to the village shop and get a couple of bottles of Bulgarian Cab Sav. I don't know. She didn't know. She just knew that it was worth coming to him, because if there was an answer, if anybody had an answer, it would be Jesus. He was the sort of guy you could rely on. She can't actually have expected that he would turn water into wine. Nobody could. It's incomprehensible. She couldn't have understood what he would do. That's precisely why she came to him. I don't know what to do, but I know a man who does. And in this is written a message for the life of faith. All sorts of hints and allusions as I've written. And you might like to take one and simply connect this wine in Cana of Galilee with the wine which you will take in communion, and realize that you're still part of the same party which Jesus threw throughout his lifetime, most notably the last one in the Last Supper. But the party still goes on, and we still belong. We still drink the new wine of the kingdom, which is in Jesus Christ. We're part of his ongoing work. We're part of the new wine. And the way Mary comes to him, I think, gives us a good example of the way we should come to him. We should come to him when we don't know what to do. We don't know how to fix it, because he can. And we're loath to, I think, in our prayers. All sorts of inhibitions hold us back. I won't trouble God with this, by which we mean this is my worry and I'm going to cling to it. We won't bring this to God because I don't see what he can do. I'm in an insoluble situation. Well, he will get out of it, dead or alive, most probably alive. In a year's time, one way or the other, it will be resolved, probably forgotten. You can't see what can be done, but something will be. And God knows. Bring it to the Lord in prayer. We won't bring it because it seems too trivial. What was going on here was trivial, really. This is a family party that's going wrong. And yes, it would have been really embarrassing for the family, and they'd never have lived it down in the village. But compared to all that was going on in the world, the Roman occupation of the Holy Land, all the cross currents, all the things that were going on, the oppression, the hardship, the cruelty, this is trivial. So we don't bring things to God because they're trivial, even though they're driving us crazy. We don't bring it to God because we don't like the answer we might get, because we're hiding, because really, actually, we know the answer, but we haven't got the courage to face it. I hid from ordination for 5 years that way, and in the end it didn't hurt a bit. It may have hurt you, but it didn't hurt me. We come to God because we're afraid to ask, because we don't really trust him, because we're afraid we won't get the answer we want, because we're afraid we won't see an answer. But you won't have lost anything, and you will have gained assurance, and you will have offloaded it, and most probably there will be an answer, and sometimes the answer will be as surprising as turning water into wine. Who'd have thought it? I never would have guessed. How did that happen? But if that's in the context of prayer, it is a miracle. Mary came to Jesus not knowing what he could do. Come to God when you don't know what to do. And come without fearing, because the God who can bother to turn water into wine, to make a wedding go with a swing, is not a begrudging God. Not a God who doesn't understand our little concerns. Not a God so bothered with the affairs of the nations that he can't look upon the hearts of his children. It's the great thing about being infinite, you see. You have lots left over to spare all the time. He is not a begrudging God. He is the God of rich supply, of abundant supply, of plenty and of goodness. So let me mix the metaphor. If you're standing on the edge of the sea of faith and afraid to take the plunge, the message from Cana of Galilee is, come on in! The wine is fine.